Thank you very much. I reopen Senate estimates and we're on CASA. Can I just ask on CASA, it seems to me, having watched for many years, probably longer than even you, Mr McCormack, the interaction between the Rural Fire Service and aviation, that guy that got killed down the coast here the other day shouldn't have been killed. I mean, the Dromedar, we know, is a plane that was fitted to carry 1,000 litres originally. We got a guy cleaned up on the Bethunga Hills there a few years ago. Do you fellas remember that? You don't?
West Australia?
No, in New South Wales, putting a fire out. Now, the difficulty, as you know, or you may know, with the Dromedar is that they are seriously upgraded with a, powered up engine, powered up load, say from 1,000 litres to probably 3,000 litres, and I think with the powered up engine, etc., they're legal at about 2.4, 2,400. They generally carry the full load, and as you'd be aware, they don't power up the airframe, and the rougher the weather and the more speed they've got to have on to put the fire out, the more load you put on the wings, and hence, when the wing fell off this plane, it shouldn't have fallen off because, I mean, those guys are crop sprayers normally and they go in with 1,000 litres, etc. And there is this, can I just say I'm disgusted, as I'm informed, that on that day it was pretty rugged weather. And the Rural Fire Service blokes, who seem to be outside, I'm coming to a question, outside the ambit of the safety guidelines of, I don't know what the interaction is with air safety and CASA and the operation of these operations, they were taunted by the Rural Fire Service because these guys didn't particularly want to fly because it was bad weather, by saying real men and real pilots would be up there. Now, if that's the attitude of the Rural Fire Service, something needs to be done between CASA and the relationships of Rural Fire Service and air firefighting. And as you would know, Mr McCormack, a lot of this stuff looks great on TV and it's useless for putting the fire out, except if you're going to dump it on a house with the Elvis. You dump 1,000 litres on a fire with high humidity and no mop-up. It looks great on the telly, but it's a waste of time. So could you tell me what the working relationship is between CASA and the Rural Fire Service on having some sort of civilised operation of these planes? I mean, sure, they're grounded, but they should never have been allowed to do the things they are. I've spoken to, I won't name them, but we may have an inquiry into this, but guys that I've known for years, I'm an old pilot, as you know, and you can actually overload a plane, especially if you're expecting it to go down ravines and up and over and in high weather and high shear. Would you like to reflect upon that death down the operation of that plane on that day, and what is the working relationship so that we can have a safe regime for Rural Fire Service firefighting by aircraft?
Yes, thank you, Senator. John McCormack, Director of Aviation Safety, Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Yes, as you say, Senator, the Dromedar has been the subject of a number of supplemental type certificates over the years, allowing increase in weight and increase in horsepower, and one before the other generally. There have been some aerodynamic refinements required to the aeroplane as well to take the extra power. And we've been working with the Dromedar operators for some time around those STCs and the effectiveness of them. Now, they date back quite a long way. The Dromedar itself, there was a failure in Western Australia, which I thought you might have been referring to a few years ago. I can't remember exactly which year, where the wing failed due to fatigue. We did quite an extensive investigation into that and found that some of the requirements which were placed on the operators after they'd implemented these or incorporated these supplemental type certificates to increase the weight may not have been necessarily being followed, particularly in recording of hours, the amount of bank angle they're allowed to use, the amount of G they're allowed to use, etc. So in reality, once the aircraft is certified and has a type certification data sheet that says it can operate at these particular weights, then it's just like any other aircraft to us from the point of view that the onus is on the operator to operate within the bounds and the boundaries of the flight manual and the flight envelope of the aircraft. As far as the Rural Fire Service goes, generally speaking, I think in New South Wales in particular, nearly everyone that undertakes fire bombing is contracted to the Bushfire Service. We provide airspace issues around the operation. We have discussed, I think, here before about some of the operators of these aircraft, not only the Drometer, the air tractor and others, wind up using multiple radios, talking to fire controllers, etc. And we generally rely on the operators to know what's safe and what's in their operations manual that we look at and how they interact with the Rural Fire Service. We don't have a head of power as such to actually impose anything on the Rural Fire Service, but we certainly haven't finished looking at this. And those particular drometers are just now coming back into service with another inspection regime in place. We haven't finished that body of work, and luckily there are not a great many drometers. It's unfortunate for the tragic accidents have killed people. There are not a lot of these aircraft in service, and we will continue to work with them.
But it seems to me that if I'm contracted with my aircraft to the Rural Fire Service, and by the way, this costs a lot of money, these standby fees. I mean, I know of one instance, I better not name the plant, but a particular, expensive plant, shall I say, piece of plant, who have two of these contracted on standby to a Rural Fire Service somewhere in Australia. The fee, for the standby fee, enables this particular operation to buy one new plant every year. That's how expensive the trend is. So I just wondered, if I'm contracted to the Rural Fire Service and there's a fire and they say, your contract, get up there and dump on that fire, if the flying conditions are not safe and I'm contracted to do the flying and they're saying to me, are you a man or aren't you? We want you to get a VC out of this and put the fire out, even though it's not safe. What protection does the pilot have, other than he's saying no and he's contracted? I mean, shouldn't there be, you'll close Sydney Airport because it's not safe. How do you not safe firefighting from the air?
Well, we do rely on the expertise of the people that are involved in the firefighting, both the on-ground commander and particularly the companies that contract to them. We have a lot of faith in the people that do this firebombing work. They're normally pretty big organisations. So we let them understand the risks and decide what should be happening. I think it's terrible if they're given intimidation to fly.
Yeah, and that's my understanding from a pilot. They feel obliged, and every now and then it all turns to custard. So,
I can give you an answer on notice if you like, Chair,
right.
about the relationship between us and the Rural Fire Service.
Because I think it's not between the pilot and the Rural Fire Service. It's got to be between you and the Rural Fire Service. I mean, there needs to be some steadying influence in the cowboy sort of attitude at times. And I'm not alleging anything broadly, but it's an uncomfortable feeling that a lot of very learned, experienced pilots have, that this guy was disgusted that the remark would be made, are you a man or aren't you, sort of get up there. Senator Fawcett.